and our guest, Annabel Monohan.
I have hair in my mouth. Well, thank you all for coming, and I just want to say thank you to Adam, who's actually on vacation, but came here anyway to see all of you, so thank you for going out of your way to do that for us and always doing all the great things you do for the Ray Art Center. Also, I want to say that because I always get very nervous about running out of alcohol personally, we have a ton of wine over there, so there's this like hand signal, you just go like that and then they'll pass a bottle down. There's no shame. And in fact, those of you may know that at the Ladies Comedy Night, we intentionally put small tables in between the chairs for the purpose of keeping you boozed up. So this will be a similar situation. But anyway, thank you for coming. It's so hot, so I was figuring people just wanted to be in a cool place, and it's not really fabulous Annabel that you wanted to see, but we had a brief discussion because Annabel's schedule is completely ridiculous, and I ran into her in December. She told me her second book was coming out, and I said, what does that feel like? And she said, I have no idea what I've gotten myself into. So that's really how it started. So I want to talk to Annabel about her starting in, I believe it was 2011 with the Rye Record and writing your first column and what it took to get to now being, I mean, dare I say the word, best-selling author.
When I wrote A Girl Named Digit 1,000 years ago, I would go speak someplace and they would introduce me as Annabel Monohan, best-selling author of A Girl Named Digit. And I was like, I think we only sold 2,000 copies of that book. But people, it's just a word that people pick up, and it gives me like the worst imposter syndrome when I hear that. And I just became a best-selling author like 2 weeks ago. And so now I just feel like I don't have to put my head in the sand.
Well, so I would think that would still feel fake.
No, it feels good. And you can't say it enough.
No, you can't. Well, so this segues right into my next question, which is, what does that mean, best-selling author? Can you throw out a few numbers for us? And this is a double question, so stay with me. Then what happens? Does somebody, like, who calls you? Is it like when you win the Pulitzer Prize and you get a phone call in the middle of the night? What happens?
Yeah, so it's a whole thing, and it's a thing that people care about so much that it kind of freak you out, like how much focus people put on this. If you're a best-selling author, if you're, I think, within the top 12 books that sold, or the top 20 books that sold that week in the country. So you have to sell a lot of books to do that. To be a New York Times best-selling author, which I am not, those books have to be in a particular, like they have to be from independent bookstores that happen to report to the New York Times. Not all bookstores do. Amazon sales are not as heavily weighted, so it's not really by the numbers. It's more like a soup of factors that go into that.
Well, there's no elitist factor.
There's something.
Right.
There's something, and like your Amazon sales. They're actually, the truth is nobody really knows what the formula is to get onto the list. So it's a whole thing.
The
and
CIA knows.
Someone knows. Someone knows. So yeah, you just Google the list and you see it. But then my publisher would email me and say, "You're now a best-selling author."
Okay, so
there's no champagne.
Where were you when that happened? And what do you do next?
Just the next. You just got to keep writing the next thing. I kind of feel like that's the theme of all this. Like something super exciting will happen to me, and I'll say yay, and I'll tell my family, and they'll say yay, and I'm like, I got to go back to work. Like I have another book due in a week from tomorrow.
So when you started by writing Nora Goes Off Script, which I hope you guys read this, the only thing that made me super sad about it is that I'm so old. So, I mean, we need to talk about some of your heroines and when they're going to age.
No one's aging.
So, but that is part of it, right? When you're writing romance novels, that you're staying within a certain style. And let's talk to the audience about what that means and how you got to that point. Because when you were writing your columns and all the other essays that you've written, most of that was fact-based, it was nonfiction.
Yes.
And this is purely fiction of the highest sort where you can disappear into these books, which is what I did.
Which is what I did while I was writing them. So I wrote Nora Goes Off Script. I feel like you guys have heard me say this 100 times, but I wrote it during the beginning of COVID, like, March 2020, I started these books. And I thought we were all gonna die. I just was like, I don't like banana bread. I don't know what to do. I'm gonna write a book. And that was my escape. Like, while everybody was doing whatever they were doing, Tommy can tell you, I was like sitting in this chair. He walked through the room, I'm like, I just wrote 7,000 more words. Like, I was just hiding in that book. So that's really all I wanted to do. I never thought anyone was gonna read it. And I don't read a lot of romance fiction. I love a love story. I just wanted to write a book. And so the book sold, and I had a meeting with my marketing team, and they said, we're gonna market this 2 ways. We're gonna market it as women's fiction and as a romance novel, and we're gonna see who picks it up. And so they put it out there with 2 sets of marketing, and the romance readers were the ones who liked it. But it doesn't really fit a romance novel. Like,
I think it does.
I didn't really know what I was doing.
Well, but when I was reading it, I was wondering, does she want more romance, or does she have so much romance in her life that it overflowed into the pen?
No, I have so much romance. It's almost too much.
So that's what I'm saying, and Tommy, cover your ears, and clearly too much sex.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, if everybody read the full paragraph of sex that's in Nora Goes Off Script, you'll really think I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, especially the part where she decides to wear a yellow dress instead of jeans because she might get lines on her belly. I'm like, oh my God, I so get that.
Yeah. Well, the thing I didn't know about romance is that the protagonist is supposed to be 30 or younger. So this was like the big groundbreaking thing of Nora Goes Off Script is that she's so old because she's 39 years old.
Right.
And that was a big buzz before the book ever came out. They're like, did you hear somebody wrote a romance novel about a woman who's old?
Old!
Yeah, it's fascinating.
So talk a little bit about, with a romance novel, in the majority of cases, they have to have a happy ending, or at least in your opinion.
Every book should have a happy ending. I am just like, I am not. Do you guys read A Little Life? I mean, I'm not reading that book again. So life is so hard. I find like the story you're always going to get for me is like the happy ending plus something extra big happens. Oh, there's ice cream in the fridge. I feel like life is, we need a little bit of that.
So, and your next book is coming out. So sort of a...
My next book, next summer?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. And more sex or less sex? We're stretching.
Yeah, I'm kind of warming up.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, I'm getting a little bit, I am awkward, like you would not believe when they ask me to write something like that. But I'm just getting a little looser about it, but not loose. There's a thing on Instagram, all the book reviewers, they give you stars for how much they liked your book, 1 to 5. And then they give you chili peppers for how spicy it is.
Oh, okay.
And I regularly get half the chili peppers. Wow. But I'm just not that guy.
I think you should try it, though.
I really don't think I should. I think I'm just gonna stick to my knitting.
Right.
Oh, that was romantic. Done.
So I love the fact that the protagonist, in most of the cases, she's attractive enough, but not too attractive to scare her audience, right?
Yes, I think that we should all just be the right amount attractive.
Right.
Yes.
And what about the guys? Because the guys seem to be hot with flaws.
Yeah, so Hot with Flaws is great. Here's the thing. I think that basically, I think we talk a lot about what people look like. I think we talk a lot about what people's bodies look like. I'm so tired of it. So when I'm writing, I almost completely don't explain or describe what somebody looks like. I'll give you a hair color, and probably nothing else. So however hot you think people are is just kind of what you're reading into it.
Well, you're making up your own guy.
You're just bring your own dream here.
Right.
But I just don't want to be in the business of like describing a woman's body type. just all of that, like putting too much influence on it. So it's like you could step into that. You could step into her shoes and just kind of live out that.
Well, so then really then the question is that in doing this, the romance novels, but to a degree, you were trying to put out an image of what you think people should be viewed as these warm, funny, interesting characters
Warm,
versus
funny,
the
and
ser-
interesting. Like that's what
Yeah.
we should be going for.
Right.
Not like, oh,
Yeah.
my abs are so toned. Or I don't know.
Right.
Just can we stop talking about that? And can we stop like giving that to our daughters to read about?
Right.
I don't have a daughter, but I just feel like it's just a cycle that we got to get out of.
Right, so I want to talk about the long trajectory of getting to where you are now. And first of all, you and I have talked about it. So you had been in the corporate world for a long time, and then you've done, gotten your master's and done all this sort of thing. And then decided to, is it throw caution to the wind, or did you know that you wanted to pivot and be in a more creative world? And did you have any idea you'd ever end up here?
Yeah, so this was always the plan. This was what I was going to do when I was like 5 years old. I was like, I'm going to be a writer, and I'm going to write all the time, and I'm just going to have a book that I'm always working on. That was like my dream. That is not a practical lifestyle, and I realized when I was in college and I was studying writing that that's not a way that I could support myself. So I got a job in banking, and I was terrible at it, and so I decided to go to business school so I didn't have to do that anymore, and then I didn't know what to do, so I went back to banking, and I stayed in that space for really not very long. I think after business school I only worked in banking, frankly, it's long enough to pay off my student loans. And I met my husband in business school, and I got pregnant, and I was like, that's my out. I was like, I am so out of here with this tiny little pregnancy. So I quit, and I was at home with kids for 8 years. And I did not ever, I thought about writing all the time, the way you kind of think about like the dream you walked away from. I never thought that it was possible for me, that I didn't ever see myself having the confidence to try to do that. But enter in 2007 Elizabeth Wolfe of Rye, New York. Do you know Elizabeth? So she says we should write this book together. And I just literally borrowed her confidence, and the two of us wrote a book together. And I never would have done that without her. So that was the first thing.
So the big question is, if you don't have an Elizabeth Wolfe walk into your life, where would you be now?
I don't know. I wonder, like, would I ever have kind of just said, you know what, I'm going to try this thing? I don't know. Because it's sort of a big thing to try. It's a very vulnerable thing to write anything. Like just writing for the Rye Record and being like, here's how I feel to my small community. And then you've got to show up on the playground and people are like, they're tough at home at the Monohan. So it's a very vulnerable thing to do, and I don't know if I would have ever had the confidence to do it without her.
Yeah, but don't you think that all women who have gotten to the place where you've gotten to have really taken those risks, whether they've been even completely aware of taking them? In other words, it's like you just sort of went with the flow. You went with that next thing. You went with that. You heard Robin Jovanovich needed a columnist, so you just went with it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think people, women in particular, overthink things and then they stall themselves. Or
what is it that they say about women versus men, that like if a man sees a job description and he has 2 out of 10 qualities, he's like, I'll apply. And a woman has 9 out of 10, she's like, I'm not qualified. I'm not going to do. It's this idea that it's all too big to go after. So for me, the only way I could do it was really in little steps. Just like trying like a little thing, like, oh, I'll write 1 column for the Rye Record, and then see if anybody likes it.
Yeah, but I think that all things that are great are really little steps.
Yeah.
Because that's when you look at the background of your trajectory, it's usually those small things that get you to the big place.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
And you don't know. Like I didn't know what the path was to being right here, so I just had to keep saying yes to things. I taught novel writing for a couple of years. I didn't do any writing the whole time I was teaching novel writing, which is why I stopped teaching novel writing. But I learned a lot about that while I was teaching it. Like, and based on what my students were doing. So it wasn't a waste of time. It was like the next small step.
But it's never a waste of time.
It's never a
That's
waste.
what
It's
it
very
is.
hard to waste time, I think. I really do.
So I'm going to talk about the thing that is really the devil's advocate, which is doing all these things and not making any money.
Oh, yeah.
And then, I mean, but let's talk about that, because it's really hard to stick with something and then have people going like, oh yeah, she's really great, well, I'm gonna make a dime doing it. I mean, and then really have to, it's true, especially in the arts, especially leaving banking, or I left the corporate world, and it's like, who do you think you are? And you don't really know who you are, but you take those steps. So what does it feel like, or did you have that goal of saying, I'm going to now switch this up and I'm going to learn how to make money doing something I'm good at?
Yeah, I would love to be the protagonist of the story that was that deliberate. I would love that to be the answer. I felt so powerless in my family not making money for so long. Like I was providing a service, being a mom, yada yada, but I just was like, God, I would love to have $30 that I owned, that I earned. And so I started working for the Rye Record, and I was literally making $60 every other week. And that was before taxes. And that check would come in, and I would put it in the kitchen on the island. I would clean the kitchen, put the thing down, and I would let it sit there for 3 days, because I just wanted them to see, look at me making $60. It takes me 2 weeks to write one of those articles.
Right.
Okay, so that just felt really good. I didn't make a whole lot more money teaching novel writing. And there is something about that where you're like, I'm doing a thing, but it's clearly not worth anything because I'm not being paid. And you have to get your head around that and just sort of embrace the fact that you enjoy doing it, but you want to make money. And then all of a sudden, I did the most joyful thing that I'd ever done, which was writing this book, Nora. And I made a lot of money. It was like all of a sudden the money came.
Because you liked it.
I liked it so much.
Right.
It was so much fun to write that book.
Right, but see, that's when it happens.
And that's when I know, but I wouldn't have believed you if you told me that. That
Yeah,
sounds
no.
like hooey.
Now, every time I walk
You
out,
should have more fun so you can be rich.
No, what is that? No, every time I walk out the door, I gotta go, I can't trust you, I've got this big thing going on there. Are they paying you? Of course, I never respond, but anyway. So aside from the fact that money is fabulous.
It's the best.
Well, it is, and I think that so many of us, we do all these services and we raise these kids and we do all this charity work and all that sort of thing, and it's fabulous. It's great for the community or whomever, and sometimes it's great as a stepping stone for yourself.
Yeah.
But it does get to the point where you sort of look at yourself and go like, maybe I'm worth something. And that's what's tricky about it, right?
And there's nothing wrong with earning money. I mean, if you don't need the money,
Yeah, but
give
you
the
gotta
money away.
But you gotta get used to not earning money.
Yeah.
And I think that's a problem.
Yeah.
And so we you know, and then you'll have these horrible people say to you, well, what are you gonna do at your age?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's what happens, but that's society.
Yeah.
And like, I was talking to some ladies earlier about the fact that, like, who started this bullshit of being invisible after 50?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just crap. And so I think that what happened with that is a lot of people on the Supreme Court were listening.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we gotta stop talking like that.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I totally agree, and it's really fun. I have a friend from high school here tonight, and when we get together, our best friends from high school, I look at them, and everybody is so much more, doing more than they were doing when they were 30. You know, everybody's all of a sudden like, no, you know what I really wanted to do? And everybody's tapping into that thing that's more joyful, which is probably gonna be more successful.
Yeah, but they're not acting like that in the, media. They're not acting like women are really revolting the way they are. Maybe it's quiet and slow. I don't know. But I don't know anybody who feels like that,
Yeah, I don't either.
right?
No, we're all doing what we're doing.
So every other day, and I know you have to self-promote, so I'm not making fun of you,
Oh,
but
no, go ahead. It's the worst.
It's the worst, right?
It's
It's
the
so
worst.
horrible. It's look at me. But look at you. And how many sort of quote awards have come in? How many have you? I mean, so many, right? Where it's like, oh, favorite beach read of the year, and this and that. I mean, you've made a ton of lists.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's really, like, people really like this book, and,
Which both books.
yeah, people really like both books, but this book is selling really well. So that's really nice. And then, but here's the thing about social media. So if you follow me on social media, it's probably not because you like my dog. It's probably you've already read my book. So then I've got the people that follow me on social media and I'm like, look, my book. Like, what do they care? Because they already read my book. So I don't know what, I just don't, I keep doing it because I have to keep doing it, but it's a really weird thing.
It's a really weird thing.
And then you get to know people on social media. Like, I have friends that I've never seen before. And I like them.
That's good for fiction. It's good for fiction.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah. So if you were to, after this third book, try to do something different, is there anything in your mind, I mean, anything that you'd like to take a shot at that's a long shot for you?
No, so here's the thing. As soon as I finish my third book, a week from Friday, I'm going to start another book. So I have another book due 2025 summer. So I'm going to keep doing that. Long term, I would maybe like to learn how to write a screenplay. That would be really fun to do.
To go from writing books that are in the same genre with same age group of attractive people.
Very attractive.
And the stories being so different.
Yeah.
So was that intentional as far as setting it up mechanically so that you would create a completely different book?
Yeah, I was really worried that I was going to write the same book again because I was like in my head about, oh God, people aren't going to like my second book. So I really wanted to write a totally different kind of book. So I wanted to make it different. The back and forth in time thing, I'm not saying I'm ever going to do it again because it was really above my pay grade. It's really confusing to write like that because you lose track of where you are.
Do you write it separately while you're doing it, or do you do it
I wrote it
sequentially?
so many times, Kim. I wrote it like all in the past, all in the present, all his perspective, all her perspective. It's madness. It was craziness. And I settled on having it be the present tense, the present timeline is first person from her perspective, and the past timeline is third person from her perspective, because I didn't trust her to tell the story of what had happened to them today, because I think she would like sugarcoat what happened.
Right.
So I needed to go back in time and have a narrator there.
Well, plus everybody's memory is faulty.
Everybody's is. And it's like if I said to you, like, oh, tell me about the boy who broke your heart when you were 16.
Which one?
Yeah, right. You would be like, oh, it was no big deal. But like if I could really put a narrator there to watch what happened, then we could really see how intense it was.
Right.
So that was deliberate, but really hard, and I'm not doing it again.
So the narrator would tell you about my high school situation was that actually my nickname was Man Eater.
Oh,
Yeah,
nice.
so.
Yeah. We never saw this coming. Really shocking revelation.
That's totally a true story. I think my parents never laughed so hard in their life as when I was in high school and they got a postcard from a convent to recruit me. I think they're still like, I'm like, oh, where is it? I mean, they couldn't even speak. It was, believe me, they don't want you. Oh my God. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about is throughout your life, because since you were 5, you've been wanting to do this. And of course, this is straight out of the New York Times book review, but so favorite authors and the people you would have at your dinner party, because they're not probably all romance novelists.
No. So my favorite person to read is Lisa Jewell. Do you know her? She's English and she's so dark. And everybody gets murdered and maybe cut up little pieces. And they're the best novels, and they're totally relaxing to me because they're so like something I could never write.
That's so interesting. No, so maybe you have to try one sometime.
And sometimes when I read, like right now, I read a lot of novels that are like something that I would write to, do the blurb on the back. And I get kind of nervous while I'm reading them because I'm like, oh, it's so much better than what I did. I like compare and contrast, so that's actually not fun for me anymore.
Yeah, but the other thing is what's tricky about it, it's like when I watch comedian specials or what have you, it's like you never want to feel like you're copying anybody.
No.
So if you're writing and you're in the middle of a book, and you're reading somebody else's book, aren't you nervous you're gonna pollute your own
I
stuff?
could totally come in through your subconscious.
That's what I'm
I
saying.
totally agree.
Yeah.
So give me, like, we're in the English countryside, somebody's just been murdered in a really nice way. And now we've
In a
got
beautiful
the-
setting.
Oh, it's so beautiful. And the genteel, Scotland Yard comes in and solves the crime. Totally relaxing to me. I would love, and I would love, because I don't know any of those writers, I would love to sit and talk to those writers and see how they do that thing, because I could not do that thing.
So who else? Who else is coming to your dinner party?
Elizabeth George writes that kind of a book.
Yeah, I love that.
Do you love her? Yeah, I think she's amazing. I would have Margaret Atwood there, but not for too long. She gets very dark.
She probably wouldn't stay long anyway.
Oh my God! What do you think she'd think of me?
It wouldn't be kind.
She'd be like, "Wow,
Yeah.
okay, you stay right there. You stay." But I adore her. I've read everything she's written probably twice.
That's it? Small dinner party.
Yeah, I don't like a lot of people. I have you there.
I come.
Yeah.
So what about male writers?
I like a lot of male writers. I really love recently the guy who wrote the book about the children who catch fire. Do you know who I'm talking about? Yes? Kevin Wilson. I think his name is Kevin Wilson. I read that recently and just thought, wow, that's really
Okay, is everybody picking up on the fact that she's probably writing romance novels so she doesn't end up in prison?
No, I sound like a serial killer. I really do. I do. I sound like a crazy person. But that's actually a very funny book. Can't think what it's called.
So that's it?
That's all I can think of right now.
All right, so we would love to have Q&A, anything you guys want to talk to Annabelle about, or literature in general. Any questions?
Question, who decides when your books are due? Is that something you're deciding?
That's a great question. No, so my books are coming out the first week of June next year and the following year. So there's a very tight publishing schedule. Like you need to see a first draft of a book that's coming out in June, the following June, by March. Because it takes a whole year once it's finished to get it copy edited and get the cover and get it marketed and do all that stuff. So my editor has a calendar in her mind where she looks at my book and she's like, wow, this doesn't make any sense. I need to see something that makes sense by July 14th. And then hopefully July 14th it's gonna make sense, and then we're gonna go back and forth and she's gonna say things like, could you make this part a little more romantic? She'll say things like that. Or, what happened to this character?
Are you giving it to her in chunks, I'm guessing? I mean, you're not giving her a whole book.
No, I give her the whole book every
You
time.
do?
Yeah.
Really? What if you're totally off track?
Well, then that's never gonna happen. I would flip.
All right, I'm just saying, it's possible.
No. I don't know what you're talking about. No, that's not possible. Yeah.
Yeah, you do.
Okay, so, because we follow you on Instagram, so media now, Annabelle, it seems like you're always on the road. So my question is, can you write when you're on the road, and has it actually helped your writing at all?
It's funny, when you're on the road, I just took my husband on a week-long road trip with me, and he said, it's really funny, so we've been busy all day, you only work 1 hour a day. So like you wake up someplace, you go to the airport, you fly someplace, you speak for 1 hour, and then you go back to your hotel. But by the time that's done, I'm so tired that I just like close my eyes and go to sleep. So I can write on airplanes. That's actually really good writing time. But for the most part, you think like, oh, 2 weeks away, you're gonna get a lot done. You're really not, because it's all kind of broken up, going through security kind of time.
And don't all of her events look like ridiculous garden parties or something? I mean, I'm like, is this fabricating? I mean, who's making this stuff up? But I did want to ask you, who is doing that?
Yeah, so.
It's nutty.
No, here's what's funny. So there are, you'll notice you don't see a post for every event. So
that's
that
a
one
trick.
where like the janitor rolled through and there was a lady who thought it was something else when she sat down. I don't photograph those. I post about that because this is marketing. So yes, a lot of times a lot of people show up, but a lot of times they don't.
Really?
Not a lot of times, but sometimes they don't.
And so what about all those people sitting there with your books? You make them do that?
Oh no, they came. And I'm so shameless. So like everybody's sitting there and they all have my book on their lap. And I'm like, before we start, can I take your picture? Could you hold up my book?
I knew it was
And then
you.
hopefully nobody's in the witness protection program. Yeah, they're like, okay, she's gonna put me on social media. No, it's me.
What about the digits? Didn't you write a series on digits?
I wrote 2, Girl Named Digit and Double Digit.
And did they teach you a lot? And, you know, because that's really, after your columns,
Yeah.
that was the next thing you did.
Those were the first novels that I wrote. Yeah, I think that, and then that kind of gave me the confidence to keep going. Every once in a while, someone buys one. I think they ring a bell and have the comments like, somebody bought Digit. But yeah, no, they're still out there. And that was such a good experience too. That was another thing. It was like, I never thought anyone would ever read A Girl Named Digit. I was just doing it, you know, to amuse myself. And so that was very exciting.
So I think everybody wants to know, because the books really sound like movies to a degree.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why you're leaning towards the screenplay.
Yeah.
But are there going to be movies made out of these books?
Yeah, so Nora Goes Off Script was optioned as a movie. And what that means is they have 18 months to start filming from the minute that the contract's signed. And so that contract was signed in December, so we're 6 months into that, and there's a writer's strike. So, come on.
Yeah, but with a writer's strike, I mean, it must be sort of delay the whole, like the 18 months must be extended
You would
because of
think.
that
You
gap.
would think. But like,
Right.
I wouldn't say it's coming to a theater near you.
And so what type of involvement would you have? Do you have a contract that says I get to be on set every day and
Yes.
bossing people around?
I just want to not be involved.
Really?
Yeah, I actually had a couple of offers or interests from people who were like, we want you to write the screenplay, and we want you to be what I'm like, I don't have time, and I also don't know how to do that, so I'd rather have it be good than be done by me. So yes, I'm not really.
So that begs the
involved.
question, and I think this comes to a lot of people's minds, is you're at that point, and somebody does say to you, hey, you can be Miss Hollywood. And forget the fact that you're under contract to write these other books and that would get you in big trouble. But it's like knowing when to say, out of my league right now. I think this is the really important thing for women, because so many of us either like we're too reluctant or we try to do too much, and then there's failure, which of course can always be rewarding. But where's your guide in that, in saying, oh, that sounds really fabulous and shiny and new, but I'm not going to do it?
I really love that you said that, because I hadn't really thought about it before. I think if this was when I was 30, I would have said, oh, okay, yeah, I'll do it. Well, I'm just gonna be in California all the time, and I'm gonna be a screenwriter, and I would have done that. And now first of all, I'm not interested in being famous. I'm interested in just doing the thing that I like doing. Like, I really just, that's my goal, is just to be able to keep doing this. So all of that just sounds like a lot of noise to me. And now I think I'm old enough to know that I'm not really interested in all that noise.
You see, that is a value of maturity.
Yeah, it's really, there's nothing better than being 53 years old. Like, I really feel like, wow, I don't have to do that because I'm 53 years old.
Nobody's tricking you.
No, it's just like, it's so much easier. Every year, it's just so much easier to say, wow, that's not fun for me.
Right. Yeah.
Full stop.
And nothing against Tommy, but it's like after you raise 3 boys, you're sort of like, I had enough about a lot of stuff.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
That's right.
Anybody else? Paula.
So I was curious about the experience of writing male characters as opposed to female characters. Because it seems like female characters might just be quite natural, and male, how hard is it to get into the mind of the male character?
Yeah, it's really funny. I didn't really think about that so a couple of the chapters in Same Time Next Summer are from Wyatt's perspective, her boyfriend. And I wrote so much about him in the third person in an early draft of this book, like 100 pages that I threw away, that I knew him really well, like he was a person that I knew. So as soon as I started writing from his perspective, it just kind of, it didn't really feel very hard. Like because I knew who he was and I knew how he felt. But there is sort of a difference, and if I reread this, I would probably see what it is, in the way that I perceive how women react to things emotionally and how men react to things emotionally. And that probably isn't a generalization that I would make about all men, that they would react the way Wyatt did, but that's kind of been my experience. So that was the personality I gave him. But I liked it. I actually liked it. I would do that again.
So what about the fact that all the parents and grandparents are really nice? Is that so your mom doesn't get mad, or your parents don't get mad at you, or I mean, like, where does that come from? So when you don't, that the older generations all seem to be golden.
Yeah, that's really funny. I think that particularly in Same Time Next Summer, it's like your family is an organism, and everything that happens in your family affects all the other people in your family, and everybody's feelings get hurt in different ways. And there's so much between those two close generations, but that older generation doesn't have issues with you. You know, they're not
far enough removed.
They're far enough removed, so it's kind of nice to have the friendly old people that are like, oh, check you out, what a disaster. You know, they can just say it. And I felt like that kind of heightens how it is sometimes with your parents. It's just so hard. Everything they're, oh, really? Because you think you always, you know, all that kind of stuff. But I also, when I was writing Nora Goes Off Script, it was sort of a wink to the Hallmark movies, where all the old people are totally healthy and self-reliant and don't meddle.
And their houses are beautifully decorated the holidays.
Beautiful, and they're so busy. The old people are so busy, and if they're not, they're dead. Every time. That's like the fantasy of the Hallmark Channel. It's so funny. So I think that was sort of.
It's so true.
It's so true. Nobody's ever like, oh.
Nobody's in assisted living and needs cash.
Exactly right.
Oh my God.
So when you finish writing, do you feel that you're finished, or are you done because your publisher said you're done? And secondly, would you go back and redo things in your head, or once you're done with the book, you move on?
Sometimes I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning rewriting a book that's been out for a year. And that is the most unproductive use of 3 o'clock in the morning ever. It's funny, between my editor and me, I really thought the last draft, I thought I was done. Absolutely not right. So I will send her this next week, and I will think it's mostly done. But we'll go back with like lightning round changes, like just a couple of quick things so many times that I don't notice when the last time was. Like, this is the last time. Because sometimes there's something that's gonna come back. But my editor decides when it's done. And she's always right. Always. She's so smart.
How did you find your editor? And have you had the same editor all along?
No.
Digit and
No. So I had my Digit was published with Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, and then when I got a new agent, and my new agent sent Nora Goes Off Script out to, and so what she does is she'll send it to a bunch of publishing houses, to a bunch of editors there, and then some of them want it, some of them don't. And the one who ended up buying Nora Goes Off Script is this woman named Tara, and now she's my editor. So I will keep her as long as she'll keep me. But we're gonna do 4 books together before we decide again. But she's great.
Go ahead.
Could you talk, go ahead. Could you talk about your process in terms of, you said you cut out 100 pages, like do you do an outline, do you write up your characters, then the plot, like how do you come up with the story, just organizationally?
Yeah, so organizationally is a funny word. When you're me, I'm really not organized in any way. So I start writing a story with just like a kernel of an idea, and I will write all the way through to the end, and then I'll think, I think I know what this story might be. And then I start at the beginning again and I rewrite it. And I will go a couple of drafts before I really start to understand who my characters are. I hope that in the future, I'm gonna spend some time figuring out who they are before I start writing, because that seems like it makes a lot of sense. But I am more creative while I'm typing. I'm not creative when I'm making a list. So I just kind of write. And I'm not really precious about my words. I don't go back and write shiny paragraphs in a first draft. So if 100 pages end up being a disaster, it's fine. Like, it doesn't hurt.
Do you save them, or do you just?
No, yeah, I save them. I save them. Just because I want my computer super clogged up. I love that. I love the hoarding of documents.
We're at the Rye Art Center, and I have to ask, you have so many art elements in the book, makes me think, and careful details too, so it makes me think you know artists in your family. Who was it influenced by, or was it all the exhibits you've seen here?
So many influences. I am not artistic. My dad is actually was artistic. He painted for like 5 or 6 years of his life. But the art was, I wanted them to be creative people. I wanted them just functionally for the book to be people who taught during the year and who were super creative during the summer. And I think that while I was writing this book, I was working through a lot of fear that I had that I wasn't going to be able to create something new. And so I created this character totally subconsciously of her father, who had had like a one-hit wonder series of paintings and couldn't do it again. And somebody pointed that out to me after this book was published, that I actually had really written a book that was a metaphor for writing the second novel. But I just wanted them to be those kind of people, you know, the kind of people who always have paint on them. I mean,
I love
maybe
it.
I know you do. I just wanted them to be those kind of people, but I am not artistic.
So a little bit influenced by your father.
A little bit.
Well, I've also noticed that all the people who get dumped in our sort of drags to be around are not artists.
What do you mean?
No, it's interesting because when you look at some of like the doctor, and he's very specific about what he does, and he's no fun to be with.
Yeah, no, that's
It's like-
true. That's true. This may be kind of a slight on people who went to college.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. Huh. Yes, pass this along to the young people.
Do you have a schedule like Laura did?
I used to. I don't anymore. I wake up really early now, so I don't, and I just write all the time. But I used to be like Nora. I used to work, go for a run, write from 10 to 2. But now I like to get up really early, like before my brain really kicks in.
So you just relax and letting it go?
Yeah, like dog and dark. And, I don't know. It's good.
Don't you have to have complete quiet though?
I don't.
You don't.
No, I don't. I like it, but I don't have to have it.
So what stops you in your tracks? What kind of noise will stop you?
Person walking in and saying, "Hey, so
What's happening?
did you call the sprinkler guy?"
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, because it's December. What are you talking about? That stops me. We don't do that.
Annoying people.
Yeah.
Annoying people. All right, so, well, thank you for coming. There's plenty of wine. One of the reasons I wanted to do this is obviously Annabel is fabulous, and I want everybody to read her books. But I also wanted to talk about just being at the Roy Art Center and how it encourages all of us to take more risks. I'm having my 12th year of ladies comedy night, which is really sort of shameful, but you have to start someplace, and you have to stick with the stuff that you love. And you do think you're sort of crazy sometimes, like, what am I doing? And somebody interviewed me for the record years ago and said, well, what do your neighbors think about you being in comedy, I said, I don't want to know what my neighbors think about me to begin with. I mean, it's like, what do you mean? But you can't care. You can't really care. And then you just keep going along, even though you think you're sort of crazy. But I want to tell a very short story about having a dream that I had, and again, being able to go through all these, go to the city and do comedy, being here and have the support of friends or whatever. And years ago, I had this dream that somehow I was going to be performing in Paris. I don't speak French, but it didn't stop me. So I joined all these online groups of Americans, in Paris doing jokes or whatever. And I have to tell you that I am booked July 22nd in Paris. I think it's like so crazy and ridiculous, but it's not ridiculous. But I don't even remember the little steps. Is my whole point.
Oh, that is
And
amazing.
it's like a dream come true. Next week, are you ready? I'm at Mohegan Sun at 10 o'clock at night. I'm like, oh my God, what's happening? But the point is that, in those cases, you just keep going.
I love it.
Yeah.
P.S. How great was this at 5 o'clock?
Yeah.
10 o'clock is for teenagers.
10 o'clock is my bedtime. Actually, 9 o'clock is my bedtime. But anyway, thank you so much.
Hey, can I say one more thing?
Oh, all proceeds.
So if you guys buy a $17 book tonight, which you're gonna need for a hostess gift in the
Yes.
future, all $17 go to the Rye Art Center. It does not stop all proceeds are going to the Rye Art Center. So thank you so much for.
Thank you. So everybody, I just want to thank everybody for coming tonight. And of course, just another round of applause for Kim Maneater Burke. And of course, Annabel Monohan. So thank you so much.